The Grand Hall of Earth's International Space Center buzzed with excitement as beings from across the galaxy gathered for the 50th Galactic Botanical Conference. Holographic displays filled the air with images of strange and beautiful plants from 1,000 worlds. In the middle of it all stood Tom Mason, adjusting the dirt samples in his exhibition booth. Tom wiped the sweat from his forehead as he arranged his latest discoveries, hardy plants that could survive in the harshest environments of space. At 32, he wasn't the youngest botanist of the conference, but his work had already earned him respect among his peers. His simple black uniform, with the Earth Botanical Society patch, stood out among the flashy outfits of alien scientists. "How primitive," a musical voice said behind him. Tom turned to find himself facing one of the most striking aliens he'd ever seen. She stood slightly taller than him, her skin a pale blue that seemed to shimmer in the light. Her eyes, large and silver, studied his work with obvious disapproval. "I'm sorry," Tom asked, keeping his voice polite. "Oh, don't be sorry. It's not your fault. Humans are still learning the basics of botanical science," she said, picking up one of his sample containers. "I'm Lyra, lead botanist of the Stellar Empire's Science Academy." Tom had heard of the Stellar Empire. Everyone had. They were among the most advanced civilizations in the known galaxy, but that didn't give them the right to look down on human achievements. "These primitive samples," Tom said, taking the container from her carefully, "can survive radiation levels that would kill most known plant species. They're the key to terraforming harsh environments." Lyra laughed, a sound like tinkling crystals. "How cute. You're proud of finding plants that merely survive. We're creating plants that thrive in any condition we want. But I suppose that's the difference between our species. You celebrate small victories while we achieve the impossible." Several nearby scientists had stopped to watch their exchange. Tom felt his face grow warm, but he kept his cool. Years of fieldwork had taught him patience. "The impossible?" he asked. "Like finding the aurora bloom." The effect was immediate. Lyra's silver eyes widened, and the shimmer of her skin intensified, a sign of emotion in her species. "You dare speak of the aurora bloom," she whispered. "That flower has been extinct for 10,000 years. The greatest botanists in the galaxy have searched for it without success." Tom shrugged. Maybe they weren't looking in the right places, or maybe they gave up too easily. "Are you suggesting," Lyra's voice rose slightly, drawing more attention, "that a human could succeed where the Stellar Empire's finest minds have failed?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Tom said, arranging his samples with careful precision. "I'm just saying that sometimes determination matters more than advanced technology." Lyra stepped closer, her silver eyes flashing. "Very well. I challenge you, Tom Mason of Earth. Find the aurora bloom. Bring it to next year's conference. Show us what human determination can achieve." The hall had gone quiet. Everyone knew about the aurora bloom, a flower said to be so beautiful it could bring tears to any species' eyes. Its extinction was considered one of the galaxy's great botanical tragedies. "And if I succeed?" Tom asked. "If you succeed," Lyra said with a smile that showed she thought it impossible, "I will personally announce to the galaxy that I was wrong about humans, that your species deserves its place among the stars." Tom looked around at the watching crowd, then back at his simple dirt samples. In them, he saw years of work, countless failures, and finally success. Each one represented human persistence paying off. "Challenge accepted," he said, holding out his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Lyra looked at his hand with amusement before extending her own. As their hands clasped, a ripple of excited whispers spread through the hall. The challenge was set. What no one noticed was the slight tremor in Lyra's hand, or the way her skin's shimmer changed from confidence to worry for just a moment. Because deep down, she knew something that she'd never admit. If any species could find the impossible flower, it would be these stubborn, persistent humans. Tom's small apartment in the Earth Botanical Society building was no longer visible under the mountains of star charts and ancient texts. 3 weeks had passed since the challenge, and he had turned his living space into a research center. His computer screen showed different star systems, while holographic projections of various space phenomena floated in the air. "Computer, show me all known locations of aurora bloom sightings from the last 20,000 years," he said, rubbing his tired eyes. The main screen lit up with a series of dots across the galaxy map. A soft beep announced an incoming call. Tom looked up to see Lyra's hologram appear in his room. Her blue skin seemed to glow even through the projection. "Checking up on my progress?" Tom asked, not looking away from his work. "Just making sure you haven't given up yet," she replied. Her silver eyes scanned his cluttered room. "Though it seems you're taking this seriously." Tom picked up an old tablet containing alien text. "Did you know the aurora bloom was first discovered by space travelers who thought they were hallucinating? They saw flowers growing in empty space, blooming in colors they couldn't describe." "Everyone knows that story," Lyra said, but there was something in her voice. Curiosity, perhaps. "Yes, but did you know they reported feeling weightless when they saw it? Not from being in space, but a different kind of weightlessness." Tom pulled up another screen, and every single sighting mentions lights like small stars inside the petals. Lyra's hologram moved closer to look at his notes. "What are you suggesting?" "The flower doesn't just grow in space," Tom said, excitement creeping into his voice. "It needs specific conditions. Zero gravity, but not just any zero gravity. Natural zero gravity points, places where gravitational forces cancel each other out." He pressed a button, and several dots on his star map lit up bright red. "These are all known gravity null points in the galaxy. Notice anything?" Lyra's eyes widened slightly. "They match some of the historical sighting locations." "Exactly." Tom stood up and walked through her hologram to reach another screen. "But that's not all. Every sighting also mentions unusual light patterns. I think the flower needs radiation, specific types of radiation that interact with its cellular structure." He brought up an old photograph, grainy and distorted. In it, something glowed with an impossible light. This was taken near a dying star 2,000 years ago. The photographer died from radiation exposure, but look at the pattern of light around the flower. Lyra leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overtaking her usual superiority. "It's similar to the radiation patterns from stellar cores in their final stages." "Now you're getting it," Tom said. He overlaid several maps on his main screen. Gravity null points, specific radiation patterns, and one more thing. Starlight. But not just any starlight. It needs the unique light spectrum of a dying star. The room fell quiet as both botanists stared at the combined data. Points of light aligned across different maps, forming a pattern that hadn't been visible before. "You actually have a theory," Lyra said softly. "A real scientific theory about the aurora bloom's growing conditions." Tom nodded. "The flower isn't extinct. It's just incredibly rare because it needs all these conditions to exist in the same place at the same time. And I think..." He pressed one final button, and a single point on the map began to pulse. "I think I know where to find it." Lyra's hologram flickered as she moved closer to the map. "That's in the Crimson Nebula. The radiation levels there are lethal. No ship can survive those conditions." Tom smiled, pulling up the designs for a heavily modified spacecraft. "No normal ship, no. But I'm having something special built. Unless, of course, you want to call off the challenge. And miss seeing you fail spectacularly." Lyra's confident smile returned, but her eyes stayed fixed on his research. "Never. Good luck, Tom Mason. You're going to need it." After her hologram disappeared, Tom looked back at his maps. He hadn't told her about the most dangerous part. The dying star in the Crimson Nebula was reaching its final stages. If his calculations were right, he had less than 3 months to find the flower before the star exploded, taking any aurora blooms with it. The race was on. The spaceport hummed with activity as Tom's modified ship, the Seedling, sat ready for launch. It looked different from standard ships. Its hull was covered in special radiation-absorbing panels that gave it a dark, metallic rainbow shine. Extra shield generators bulged from its sides, making it look like a strange hybrid between a research vessel and a battle cruiser. Final systems check complete, the ship's computer announced as Tom loaded the last of his equipment. The cargo hold was filled with specialized containers designed to preserve any plant specimens he might find, including one special case built specifically for the Aurora bloom. "You actually had it built," a familiar voice said. Tom turned to see Lyra walking up the loading ramp, her blue skin reflecting the ship's interior lights. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Tom asked, securing a crate of sensor equipment. Lyra ran her hand along the ship's wall. Most humans would have quit after seeing the cost, or the danger warnings, or the 16 different waivers they had to sign. "I'm not most humans," Tom said, checking his navigation systems. The route to the Crimson Nebula was already plotted, though he knew he'd have to make several stops along the way. "Clearly not." Lyra pulled something from her pocket, a small crystalline device. "Here, take this." Tom looked at the device suspiciously. "What is it?" "A Stellar Empire emergency beacon. If you get into real trouble, activate it. Our nearest ship will come to help." She placed it in his hand. "Don't read too much into it. I just don't want your death on my conscience." Before Tom could respond, the ship's computer interrupted. "Warning. Launch window opens in 10 minutes. "That's my cue to leave," Lyra said, turning to go. At the ramp, she paused. "Try not to die, Tom Mason. It would make for a very anticlimactic end to our challenge." Tom watched her leave, then looked at the beacon in his hand. He carefully packed it with his emergency supplies. The launch was smooth, and soon Earth was just a blue marble behind him. Tom activated the ship's special features one by one: radiation shields, gravity stabilizers, and the advanced life support systems he hoped he wouldn't need. His first stop was an abandoned research station near the edge of settled space. The station spun slowly in the void, its solar panels long since broken. Tom docked carefully, his ship's lights illuminating the station's faded name: Botanical Research Station 47. Inside, the air was stale despite his suit's filters. Tom floated through empty corridors, his helmet lights showing years of decay. In the main research lab, he found what he was looking for: old sample containers with traces of unusual radiation patterns. "Computer, analyze these residual signatures," he said, holding up his scanner. "Compare them to our Aurora bloom data." The computer beeped. "Match found. Radiation pattern is consistent with theoretical Aurora bloom growth requirements." Tom smiled behind his helmet. His research was right. The station had once housed samples of plants exposed to the same type of radiation he was looking for. He was on the right track. Back on his ship, Tom updated his maps. The radiation signature gave him a more precise heading into the Crimson Nebula. As he prepared to jump to his next destination, a warning light flashed on his console. "Warning," the computer announced. "Unknown energy signature detected ahead." Tom checked his sensors. Something large was moving in the debris field before him. Something that shouldn't be there. His radar showed a shape emerging from behind a chunk of the old station. A ship, but not like any he'd seen before. "Computer, scan that vessel. Is it following us?" The answer came back immediately. "Affirmative. Unknown vessel has adjusted course to match our trajectory." Tom gripped his controls tighter. He hadn't expected company this far out, and he doubted they were here to help. The real challenge, it seemed, was just beginning. The mysterious ship turned out to be the least of Tom's problems. After a tense chase through the debris field, he'd managed to lose them by diving into a dense radiation cloud that his ship's special shielding could handle. But now, 2 weeks into his journey, he faced a far bigger challenge. Warning lights flashed across the Seedling's control panel as the ship shuddered violently. Outside the viewport, waves of purple and green energy rolled through space. a massive radiation storm that hadn't shown up on any of his charts. Hull integrity at 60%, the computer announced calmly. Shield failure imminent. Tom's hands flew over the controls, trying to find a safe route through the storm. His ship was tough, but not tough enough for this. The radiation levels were off the charts, even worse than what he prepared for. Computer, scan for any nearby planets or asteroids. We need shelter. The screen lit up with a map. A single planet hung at the edge of his sensor range. A small, rocky world with a thin atmosphere. It wasn't ideal, but it was his only choice. Plotting emergency landing trajectory, the computer said. Another violent shake rocked the ship. Warning: shield failure in 3 minutes. Tom grit his teeth as he pushed the engines to their limit. The planet grew larger in his viewport, its surface a maze of deep canyons and sharp mountains. The entry into the atmosphere was rough, the ship groaning as it pushed through layers of thin alien air. "Find me a landing spot," Tom ordered, fighting with the controls. "Somewhere sheltered." The computer highlighted a deep canyon, partially protected from the radiation storm above. Tom aimed for it, using the last of his maneuvering fuel to slow their descent. The landing was hard, more of a controlled crash, but the ship stayed in one piece. As the dust settled around the seedling, Tom checked his systems. The main engine was damaged, the shields were completely drained, and half his sensor array was fried. He wasn't going anywhere until he made repairs. "At least the life support still works," he muttered, suiting up to check the exterior damage. The planet's surface was harsh but beautiful in its own way. Red rocks stretched toward a purple sky, and the radiation storm created eerie lights in the clouds above. His suit's sensors showed the atmosphere was thin but breathable, though the radiation levels meant he couldn't take his suit off. As Tom walked around his ship assessing the damage, something caught his eye. At the base of the canyon wall, partially hidden by rocks, was what looked like an entrance. It was too regular to be natural. Someone, or something, had made it. "Computer, scan that opening," he said into his comm. "Is it safe to explore?" Structure appears stable. Interior shows lower radiation levels than surface. Warning: structure design matches ancient botanical research outpost patterns. Tom's heart beat faster. A botanical research outpost, all the way out here. This couldn't be a coincidence. He gathered his emergency supplies, including a portable scanner and some light sources. The entrance led to a tunnel that sloped gently downward. The walls were smooth, carved with symbols that his translator couldn't make sense of. After about 50 meters, the tunnel opened into a large chamber that made Tom stop in his tracks. The room was filled with what could only be a laboratory. Ancient equipment lay covered in dust, and faded holographic displays flickered weakly in the air. But what really caught his attention was the large mural on the far wall. It showed a flower, a very familiar flower, floating in space near a dying star. Around it, the same symbols from the tunnel told a story he couldn't read. But one thing was clear: he'd stumbled onto something important. Maybe the storm had done him a favor after all. A beeping from his suit interrupted his thoughts. "Incoming transmission," the computer announced. "Origin, Stellar Empire Diplomatic Channel." It was Lyra. "Tom, your emergency beacon just activated. Are you alive in there?" Tom looked down at his emergency pack. The beacon must have triggered automatically during the crash. He smiled despite his situation. "I'm alive," he replied. "And Lyra, I think I just found something you're going to want to see." 3 days of repairs and research in the ancient outpost had given Tom everything he needed. The mural wasn't just art. It was a map. The symbols, once properly translated by Lyra through their communications link, told the story of the Aurora Bloom's original discovery and its perfect growing conditions. "Are you sure about this?" Lyra's voice crackled through the ship's newly repaired comm system. "The coordinates point to the heart of the radiation storm." "That's the point," Tom replied, checking his ship's reinforced shields. The repairs had made the seedling stronger than before. The storm isn't a problem. It's the key. The ancient botanists found the flowers growing in similar conditions. The seedling rose smoothly from the planet's surface, its engines humming with fresh power. Tom had cannibalized some of the ancient outpost's still-working technology to improve his ship's systems. The old botanists had known what they were doing when it came to handling extreme radiation. As the ship climbed through the atmosphere, the radiation storm painted the sky in sheets of colored light. But this time, Tom wasn't running away from it. He was heading straight into its center. Computer, activate all shields. Full power to radiation protection systems. The storm wrapped around his ship like a glowing blanket. The seedling sensors pierced through the energy waves, following the coordinates from the ancient map. At the heart of the storm, something was creating a perfect balance of forces: gravity, radiation, and light, all meeting at a single point. Energy readings are off the scale, Tom reported, more to himself than to Lyra, who was still listening. The radiation patterns, they're exactly like the ones in the old records. Through the swirling energy of the storm, something caught his eye. A patch of seemingly empty space that wasn't quite empty. The ship's sensors showed a pocket of perfectly stable space, protected from the chaos around it. "I'm going to try to get closer," Tom said, carefully maneuvering the seedling toward the anomaly. As his ship entered the stable pocket, all the noise and vibration stopped. It was like entering the eye of a hurricane. And there, floating in the perfectly calm space, was what he'd spent months searching for: aurora blooms. Dozens of them. They floated like stars come to life, their petals moving in an invisible current. Each flower was about the size of his hand, with crystalline petals that seemed to capture and reflect light that wasn't there. Colors he had no names for danced across their surfaces. "Tom." Lyra's voice was concerned by his long silence. "What do you see?" "They're here," he whispered. "They're real. Lyra, they're more beautiful than any description. The petals, they're not just reflecting light, they're creating it. It's like they're taking the radiation from the storm and turning it into pure color." He carefully maneuvered his ship closer, preparing one of his special specimen containers. The flowers moved like they were aware of his presence, their petals turning to face the ship. "The ancient botanists were right," Tom continued, his voice full of wonder. "They need these exact conditions. The radiation feeds them, the gravity null point keeps them stable, and the light. The light from the dying star helps them transform the energy. They're not just flowers. They're living works of art." With practiced care, Tom extended the ship's collection arm. He selected a single bloom, making sure not to disturb its neighbors. The specimen container was designed to perfectly maintain the flower's environment, the same gravity, radiation, and light conditions it needed to survive. "I'm bringing one in now," he reported. Container environment is stable. The flower, it's still glowing, still alive. Just then, his ship's sensors blared a warning. The radiation storm was intensifying, and the safe pocket was beginning to destabilize. "Tom, get out of there." Lyra's voice was urgent now. "The storm is collapsing." With the precious flowers secured, Tom turned his ship toward safer space. He took one last look at the remaining aurora blooms, their mysterious colors swirling in the void, before pushing his engines to full power. He had found the impossible. Now he just had to survive long enough to prove it. The seedling burst from the radiation storm like a bullet from a gun, its shields glowing red-hot from the energy. Inside the ship, Tom worked frantically at the controls, trying to put as much distance as possible between himself and the collapsing storm behind him. "Container status," he asked the computer, sparing a quick glance at the precious cargoes secured in its special housing. "Specimen environment stable," the computer replied. "Aurora bloom vital signs normal." The flower floated in its container, still radiating those impossible colors. Even through the specially designed walls, Tom could see its glow pulsing gently, like a heartbeat made of light, but he couldn't admire it for long. His problems were far from over. Warning, the computer announced. Radiation storm expanding. Current trajectory insufficient to escape blast radius. Tom looked at his rear sensors. The storm wasn't just collapsing. It was exploding outward, growing larger by the second. The dying star at its heart was finally giving up its fight against gravity. "Lyra," he called into the comm. "Are you still there?" Her voice came back, broken by static, but clear enough to understand. "I'm here. Your ship's energy signature is getting weaker. What's happening?" "The star is going supernova," Tom said, checking his engine readings. "My shields are almost gone, and I don't have enough power to outrun the blast." There was a pause, then Lyra's voice returned, stronger. "Listen carefully. I'm sending you coordinates. There's a space fold nearby. A natural wormhole. It's unstable, but it could get you out of there." New data flashed across Tom's screen. The space fold was close, but reaching it would mean flying dangerously close to the dying star. "That's awfully close to the blast zone," he said, already adjusting his course. "It's your only chance," Lyra replied. "And Tom, don't you dare lose that flower after all this." The ship's engines screamed as Tom pushed them beyond their limits. The dying star filled his viewport now, its surface writhing with massive solar flares. The heat was incredible. Even with his shields, he could feel it inside the ship. "Space fold detected," the computer announced. "Warning, gravitational forces exceeding safe limits." Tom could see it ahead, a twist in space itself, like a tear in fabric. But reaching it meant threading a needle between the star's gravity well and the approaching radiation wave. "Container status," he asked again, gripping his controls tighter. "Environment destabilizing. Specimen showing signs of stress." The aurora bloom's glow was flickering now, its petals trembling in its artificial environment. The forces around the ship were affecting it. Despite all the container's protections, Tom had a choice to make. The safer route to the space fold would take longer but put less strain on the ship. The direct route was more dangerous, but would get him there faster. Looking at the weakening flower, he made his decision. "Hang on," he whispered, both to the flower and himself. Then he turned his ship directly toward the space fold, cutting through the star's corona itself. The heat was unbearable. Warning lights flashed across every panel as the ship's systems began to fail one by one. The star's surface erupted behind him, the supernova beginning in earnest. The space fold grew larger in his viewport, its edges rippling with gravitational energy. Tom felt the ship shudder as different forces pulled at it from all directions. The flower's container blinked red. Its environment was failing. "Come on," Tom urged his ship forward. "Just a little more." The star exploded. A wall of energy rushed toward the seedling like a tidal wave of fire. The space fold was right in front of him now, a swirling vortex in space. With the last of his engine power, Tom aimed his ship straight into the fold's heart. The universe twisted around him as space itself bent and warped. The last thing he saw before consciousness left him was the aurora bloom's glow returning, stronger than ever, as if the flower had found new strength in their desperate escape. The Grand Hall of Earth's International Space Center was even more crowded than last year. Word had spread about Tom's journey, and scientists from every corner of the galaxy had come to see if he had really succeeded. The air buzzed with excitement and skepticism in equal measure. Tom stood behind a curtained-off area, checking the flower's container one last time. The aurora bloom had not only survived their wild ride through the space fold, but seemed to have grown stronger. Its glow was steady now, and its petals moved with graceful purpose in the carefully maintained environment. "Ready?" Lyra asked, appearing beside him. She had been waiting at Earth's nearest space station when he emerged from the space fold, half-conscious but triumphant. "Almost," Tom replied, making a final adjustment to the container settings. "Still nervous about going out there." "Me? Why would I be nervous?" But her skin's shimmer gave away her anxiety. Because you have to admit you were wrong about humans, Tom said with a small smile, in front of the entire galactic scientific community. Before she could reply, the announcement came over the speakers. Distinguished guests, please welcome Tom Mason and lead botanist Lyra of the Stellar Empire. They'd walked onto the stage together, Tom carefully carrying the container. The crowd fell silent as they saw what floated inside it. The aurora bloom's glow filled the hall with colors that shouldn't exist, its petals dancing in an invisible breeze. Impossible, someone whispered, but the word was filled with wonder, not doubt. Lyra stepped forward to the podium. Her voice, usually so confident, shook slightly as she began to speak. 1 year ago, I stood in this hall and challenged Tom Mason to find what I believed was unfindable. I did this not because I thought he might succeed, but because I was certain he would fail. I wanted to prove that humans, with their primitive technology and limited understanding, could never achieve what the greatest minds of the Stellar Empire could not. She paused, looking at Tom and the glowing flower. I was wrong, not just about the aurora bloom's existence, but about humans themselves. What I saw as primitive technology was actually elegant simplicity. What I dismissed as limited understanding was instead a different kind of wisdom. And what I failed to recognize was that the greatest discoveries don't come from advanced technology or superior knowledge alone. Tom stepped forward, placing the container on a special pedestal where everyone could see it clearly. The flowers seemed to shine brighter, as if it knew it had an audience. The aurora bloom survived extinction. Lyra continued, hiding in the most dangerous corners of space, where only those with true dedication would dare to look. Tom Mason found it not because he had the best ship or the most advanced sensors, but because he had something we of the Stellar Empire have forgotten to value: determination. The human spirit that refuses to give up, that finds ways around problems instead of just powering through them, that sees setbacks as opportunities for discovery. She turned to face Tom directly. Today, I formally acknowledge that I was wrong about humanity. Your species has earned its place among the stars not because of what you know, but because of how far you'll go to learn more. The Stellar Empire would be honored to begin a full scientific exchange program with Earth's botanical community. The hall erupted in applause. But Tom was watching the aurora bloom, its mysterious colors swirling and changing. In its glow, he saw the promise of more discoveries waiting to be made, more impossible things waiting to be found. And he knew this was just the beginning, because now the galaxy would see what humanity could really do, not just with technology, but with heart, determination, and the unwavering spirit that had taken him to the edges of space and back. The flower's light pulsed once, brightly, as if in agreement.